Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, staring at the stars through the main view screen. The ship hummed quietly around him as it traveled through the darkness of space. Jake had been in command for 3 years, and he loved every moment of it. The Defiance was humanity's newest and strongest warship, built with the best technology Earth could create. "Captain, we're getting a message from Earth Command," said Commander Lisa Carter, his second-in-command. She was a smart woman who had served with Jake for 2 years. Her voice sounded worried, which made Jake pay attention right away. "Put on the main screen," Jake said, turning to face the communication display. The face of Admiral Patricia Wells appeared on the screen. She was the head of Earth Space Defense, and she never looked this serious unless something bad was happening. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes showed the weight of whatever news she was about to share. "Captain Morrison, I have urgent orders for you," Admiral Wells began. "The Zephyrian Empire has sent us an ultimatum. They want all human colonies to surrender within 7 days, or they'll destroy every human world they can find." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Zephyrians were the most powerful force in the galaxy. They had ruled over countless worlds for 10,000 years. Their ships were huge, and their weapons could destroy entire planets. No one had ever defeated them in battle. "Admiral, what are our orders?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. "The Zephyrian Grand Fleet is moving toward our space. We count over 3,000 ships, led by Admiral Kethvar himself. You know what that means." Everyone on the bridge knew. Kethvar was called the Destroyer because he had wiped out entire civilizations. If he was coming personally, it meant the Zephyrians were not planning to take prisoners. Lieutenant Alex Thompson, who handled weapons and tactics, looked up from his station. "Captain, 3,000 ships? We only have 50 ships in the entire human fleet." "I know the odds, Lieutenant," Jake said quietly. He looked back at Admiral Wells on the screen. "What do you want us to do?" "Earth is evacuating as many people as possible to the outer colonies," the Admiral explained. "But we need time. The Defiance is our most advanced ship. I need you to slow down the Zephyrian fleet somehow. Give our people a chance to escape." Jake understood. It was a suicide mission. 1 ship against 3,000 was not a battle. It was certain death. But if they could buy even a few days, maybe millions of humans could get away to safety. "We'll do our best, Admiral," Jake said. "I know you will, Captain. Good luck." Earth Command out. The screen went dark, and the bridge was quiet for a long moment. Jake could feel his crew looking at him, waiting to see what he would say. These were good people who had families back on Earth. They deserved to know the truth. "You all heard that," Jake said, turning to face his crew. "I won't lie to you. This is probably a one-way trip. Anyone who wants to transfer off the ship can do so at our next supply stop." Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez was the first to speak. He was a big man with strong hands who could fix anything on the ship. "Captain, I've been working on this ship since it was built. I'm not leaving now." "Same here," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the ship's chief scientist. She was young but brilliant, and Jake trusted her completely. "If we're going to face the Zephyrians, you'll need every advantage you can get. Maybe I can figure something out." One by one, every officer on the bridge agreed to stay. Jake felt proud of his crew, but also sad. These were the best people he had ever worked with, and he was probably leading them all to their deaths. "All right then," Jake said. "Sam, I want the engines running at peak efficiency. Sarah, start thinking about any weaknesses the Zephyrians might have. Alex, plot a course for the Kepler Nebula. If we're going to intercept that fleet, we'll need every advantage we can get." The Kepler Nebula was a large cloud of gas and dust that created electrical storms. Most ships avoided it because the storms could damage their systems. But Jake was thinking that maybe they could use the nebula to level the playing field somehow. Lieutenant Commander Kelly Barnes, who led their fighter pilots, stepped forward. "Captain, my pilots are ready for anything. Just tell us what you need." "I'll need everyone at their best," Jake replied. "But, Kelly, I want you to make sure your people understand what we're facing. The Zephyrians have never lost a battle. Their ships are bigger and stronger than anything we've ever seen." Communications Officer Ryan Clark looked up from his station. Captain, I'm picking up some chatter from other Galactic Federation ships. Word is spreading fast about the Zephyrian ultimatum. It sounds like most species are just going to let it happen. That made Jake angry, but not surprised. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Federation, and most other species looked down on them. They thought humans were weak and primitive. Maybe they were right about being primitive, but Jake knew humans were not weak. Let them think what they want, Jake said. We'll show them what humans can do. The next few hours were busy as the crew prepared for what was coming. Sam worked in the engine room, making sure every system was perfect. Sarah studied everything they knew about Zephyrian technology, looking for any weakness she could find. Alex checked and rechecked their weapon systems. Jake walked through the ship, talking to his crew. There were 200 people aboard the Defiance, and every one of them had chosen to stay and fight. They came from all over Earth, farmers and city people, rich and poor, all different colors and backgrounds. But they were united in one thing. They would not let the Zephyrians destroy humanity without a fight. As the ship traveled toward the Kepler Nebula, Jake stood alone in his ready room, looking at pictures of Earth. Green forests, blue oceans, white clouds. It was the most beautiful planet in the galaxy as far as he was concerned. His own family lived in a small town in Colorado. His wife Emma taught school, and his daughter Katie was only 8 years old. Jake made a promise to himself. Even if the Defiance was destroyed, even if he never saw his family again, he would make sure the Zephyrians paid a price for attacking humanity. They thought humans were just another weak species to be conquered. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The USS Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler Nebula. Captain Jake Morrison had seen many beautiful sights in space, but this was something special. The nebula stretched out before them, like a giant storm cloud made of purple and blue light. Electric bolts danced between the gas clouds, creating a light show that took his breath away. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Martinez from her science station. "The energy readings are off the charts. This nebula is like a massive electrical storm that never ends." "That's what we're counting on," Jake replied. He turned to Lieutenant Alex Thompson. "Alex, any sign of the Zephyrian fleet yet?" Alex checked his sensors carefully. "Not yet, Captain. But if they're coming this way, we should see them soon." Jake nodded and walked over to Sarah's station. "Doctor, tell me you found something we can use against them." Sarah looked up from her computer screens. She had been working for days without much sleep, trying to find any weakness in Zephyrian technology. "I've been studying every battle report we have. The Zephyrians always win the same way. They use brute force. Their ships are so big and heavily armed that they just smash through enemy defenses. That doesn't help us much," Jake said with a frown. "Actually, it might," Sarah continued. "They've been winning battles the same way for thousands of years. That means they probably haven't had to change or improve their tactics. They might be predictable." Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez came onto the bridge, wiping grease off his hands. "Captain, I've got the engines running as smooth as silk. But I have to tell you, if we run into a real fight, I don't know how long we can keep up with ships 10 times our size." Before Jake could answer, Communications Officer Ryan Clark called out urgently, "Captain, I'm picking up massive energy signatures coming out of hyperspace. It's them." "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The view screen showed empty space for a moment. Then reality seemed to tear open as ships began appearing. First 1, then 10, then 100. They kept coming until the space in front of the nebula was filled with more warships than anyone on the Defiance had ever seen. The Zephyrian ships were enormous. Each one was at least 10 times longer than the Defiance, with dark metal hulls covered in weapon ports. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of deadly fish swimming through space. At the center of the formation was the largest ship Jake had ever seen, Admiral Kethvar's flagship, the Eternal Conquest. 3,012 ships, Alex reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, each one of those ships could probably destroy our entire fleet by itself." Jake stared at the enemy armada and felt a chill run down his spine. He had known the odds were bad, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. It was like watching a tidal wave coming toward a small boat. Lieutenant Commander Kelly Barnes spoke from her fighter control station. "Captain, my pilots are ready to launch, but against that many ships." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ryan Clark looked up from his communications panel. "Captain, I'm intercepting their battle communications. They're using an open channel. They don't even care if we hear them." "Let's listen," Jake said. Ryan put the Zephyrian communications on the bridge speakers. The voices were deep and harsh, speaking their own language, but the ship's computer translated the words into English. "Sector Commander Vestan, you will take the northern approach. This should be a simple training exercise for your junior officers. Acknowledge, Fleet Admiral. Are we expecting any real resistance from the humans?" "Negative. Intelligence reports indicate they have only primitive weapons and weak shields. Use this opportunity to teach your new commanders how to conduct a proper orbital bombardment." Jake felt anger burning in his chest. Training exercise. They thought destroying humanity would be good practice for their new officers. The communication continued. "Remember, we want at least a few human colonies intact for slave labor. These creatures might be useful for mining operations." Dr. Martinez grabbed Jake's arm. "Captain, did you hear that? They're not even taking us seriously. They think this is going to be easy." "That might be the first mistake they've made in 1,000 years," Jake replied grimly. Alex looked up from his sensor readings. "Captain, they're sending a single destroyer toward us. Just one ship." Jake couldn't believe it. Out of 3,000 ships, they were only sending one to deal with the Defiance. It was an insult, but it was also an opportunity. "Kelly, launch all fighters. I want them to hit that destroyer hard and fast. Then get back here." "Fighters launching now," Kelly reported. On the main screen, Jake watched as 12 small human fighters raced away from the Defiance toward the massive Zephyrian destroyer. The destroyer was still 3 times larger than the Defiance, but was alone and probably not expecting a real fight. The human fighters moved like angry wasps around the big alien ship. They fired their weapons at weak spots in the destroyer's armor, dancing around its return fire with quick turns and rolls that the bigger ship couldn't match. "Direct hit on their engine section," called out one of the fighter pilots over the radio. "Their shields are down." The fighters pressed their attack, and after several minutes of intense fighting, the Zephyrian destroyer exploded in a ball of fire and debris. The bridge crew of the Defiance cheered, but Jake remained quiet. He was watching the main Zephyrian fleet on his sensors. "Ryan, what are they saying now?" Jake asked. Ryan listened to the enemy communications for a moment. "They're confused, Captain. I don't think they expected to lose a ship. Admiral Ketvar is demanding to know how primitive humans could destroy one of his destroyers." "Good," Jake said. "Sarah, I need you to study the debris from that destroyer. Maybe we can learn something about their technology." Sarah was already working. "Captain, I'm seeing something interesting. Their armor is incredibly thick, but it seems to be designed to stop big, powerful weapons. Our smaller, faster weapons punch right through because they hit spots the armor wasn't designed to protect." Sam Rodriguez grinned. "Like using a needle instead of a hammer. Sometimes smaller is better." Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe they couldn't match the Zephyrians in raw power, but humans had always been good at finding creative solutions to impossible problems. "Ryan, are they sending more ships?" Jake asked. "Yes, Captain. Looks like a full battle group this time. 20 ships. Admiral Ketvar is not happy about losing that destroyer." Jake looked at his crew. They had just won their first victory against the galaxy's strongest force, but it was only the beginning. 20 ships were more than they could handle in a straight fight, but maybe they didn't have to fight fair. "Take us into the nebula," Jake ordered. "If they want to find us, they'll have to come into the storm." The Defiance moved forward into the swirling clouds of the Kepler Nebula. Lightning danced around the ship as they disappeared into the purple and blue mists. Behind them, the Zephyrian battle group followed, not knowing they were flying into a trap that humanity was just beginning to understand. The USS Defiance flew deeper into the Kepler Nebula, surrounded by dancing lightning and swirling clouds of charged gas. Captain Jake Morrison could feel the ship shaking as electrical storms buffeted their hull. Behind them, 20 Zephyrian warships followed like hungry predators chasing wounded prey. "Captain, the nebula is interfering with our sensors," reported Lieutenant Alex Thompson. "I can barely see 50 meters in any direction." "Same for them," Jake replied. "That levels the playing field a little." Dr. Sarah Martinez looked up from her science station with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, I think I found something important. The debris from that destroyer we destroyed. I've been analyzing the energy patterns from their shield systems." "What did you find?" Jake asked, moving over to her station. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the energy readings. "Look at this. Zephyrian shields operate on a very specific frequency. It's the same frequency they've been using for thousands of years, probably because it works so well against most weapons." Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez joined them at the science station. "What does that mean for us?" "Well," Sarah continued, "normally that frequency makes their shields almost impossible to break through. But here in the nebula, with all these electrical storms, something interesting happens." She adjusted the display to show the nebula's energy patterns. The charged particles in this nebula vibrate at almost the same frequency as their shields. If we could somehow amplify that vibration, their own shields would tear themselves apart, Sam finished, understanding immediately. Jake felt his heart racing. "Can we do it? Can we actually make that work?" Sarah hesitated. "Theoretically, yes, but we need to modify our quantum torpedoes to match the exact frequency. And we have to get close enough to the Zephyrian ships to make sure the effect spreads through the nebula." "How close?" Jake asked. "Close enough that we'd probably be destroyed in the process," Sarah admitted. The bridge was quiet for a moment as everyone understood what that meant. Chief Tactical Officer Nick Palmer spoke up from his station. "Captain, even if Dr. Martinez is right, we'd still be facing impossible odds. 20 ships is a lot more than one destroyer." "I know," Jake said, "but maybe we don't have to fight all 20 at once." Communications Officer Ryan Clark interrupted. "Captain, I'm picking up Zephyrian communications. They're splitting up to search for us. Looks like they're sending ships in different directions through the nebula." Jake smiled for the first time in hours. The Zephyrians were making another mistake. In the nebula, their superior numbers didn't help them as much. In fact, spreading out made them vulnerable. "Alex, plot a course toward the nearest group of enemy ships." "How many?" "Sensors show 5 ships moving toward our position from the northeast," Alex reported. "Perfect. Kelly, I want all fighters ready to launch on my command, but they stay hidden until the last second." Lieutenant Commander Kelly Barnes nodded from her fighter control station. "Understood, Captain. My pilots are ready." Jake turned to address his entire bridge crew. "Listen, everyone. We're about to try something that's never been done before. Dr. Martinez's plan might work, or it might get us all killed. But if we can prove that the Zephyrians can be defeated, other species might join the fight against them." Lieutenant Amy Foster, who monitored the ship's sensors, looked up with concern. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching. Those 5 ships are huge." On the main view screen, 5 dark shapes emerged from the purple clouds of the nebula. Each Zephyrian cruiser was 3 times the size of the Defiance, bristling with weapons and protected by powerful energy shields. They moved in a perfect V formation, their sensors sweeping the area for the human ship. "They're trying to flush us out," Jake observed. "Ryan, what are they saying?" Ryan listened to the enemy communications. "The lead ship is called the Pain of Worlds. Their commander is reporting that they found traces of our exhaust trail. They're moving to attack positions." "Now we find out if Sarah's theory works," Jake said quietly. "Sarah, are the torpedoes ready?" "Modified and loaded, Captain. But remember, this is all theoretical. I've never tested this before." "First time for everything," Jake replied. "All hands, battle stations." Alarms sounded throughout the ship as the crew prepared for combat. In the engine room, Sam Rodriguez made final adjustments to ensure maximum power to weapons and shields. Medical Officer Dr. Ben Tucker prepared the medical bay for casualties. Throughout the ship, 200 brave humans got ready to face impossible odds. Enemy ships are powering up weapons, Alex reported. They're targeting our position. Jake took a deep breath. Launch fighters. All weapons. Prepare to fire on my mark. The Defiance's 12 fighters burst out of their launch bay like angry hornets, immediately spreading out to attack the Zephyrian formation from multiple angles. The alien ships responded by firing massive energy beams that lit up the nebula like deadly fireworks. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered as enemy fire barely missed their hull. The Defiance twisted and rolled through the electrical storms, using the nebula's natural chaos to avoid the worst of the enemy attack. But the Zephyrian ships were closing in, and their superior firepower was starting to tell. Hull breach on Deck 7, called out Damage Control Chief Chris Evans over the intercom. We got fires spreading, but damage control teams are responding. Captain, we're losing shield strength fast, reported Nick Palmer. We can't take much more of this. Sarah, now or never, Jake said. Firing modified quantum torpedoes, Sarah announced. The torpedoes streaked away from the Defiance toward the center of the Zephyrian formation. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the nebula around the enemy ships began to glow brighter, and Jake could see the electrical storms becoming more intense. It's working, Sarah shouted. The resonance is building. Look at their shields. On the main screen, Jake watched as the energy barriers protecting the Zephyrian ships began to flicker and pulse. The charged particles in the nebula were vibrating at the same frequency as their shields, creating a feedback loop that grew stronger by the second. Their shields are failing, Alex reported with amazement. All 5 ships are losing shield power. The lead Zephyrian cruiser, the Pain of Worlds, suddenly erupted in a series of explosions as its own shield generators overloaded and destroyed the ship from within. The other 4 ships tried to retreat, but the resonance effect was spreading faster than they could fly. One by one, the massive alien warships tore themselves apart as their ancient shield technology became their own worst enemy. In less than 5 minutes, all 5 Zephyrian cruisers were nothing but burning debris floating in the nebula. The bridge of the Defiance was silent, except for the sound of damage reports and the hum of emergency repairs. Jake's crew stared at their instruments in disbelief. They had just destroyed 5 ships that should have been able to wipe out their entire fleet. Ryan, what are the other Zephyrian ships saying? Jake asked. Ryan listened to the enemy communications with a growing smile on his face. Captain, they're panicking. They don't understand what happened. Admiral Kethvar is demanding explanations that none of his officers can give. Jake felt a fierce satisfaction. The galaxy's strongest force had just learned that strength could be a weakness when used against the right enemy. But this was only the beginning. Sarah, can we do it again? Can we make this work on a larger scale? Sarah was already running calculations on her computer. Captain, if we could get close enough to their main fleet, if we could create a resonance cascade that spreads through the entire nebula. She didn't need to finish. Jake understood. They had found a way to turn the Zephyrians' own power against them. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. The USS Defiance moved through the heart of the Kepler Nebula like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching his crew work frantically to keep their ship alive. Damage report. Jake called out. Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, we got hull breaches on 3 decks. The port fusion reactor is running at 60%, and our shield generators are held together with prayer and spare parts. But we're still flying. That's all I need to hear, Jake replied. He turned to Dr. Sarah Martinez, who was hunched over her science station. Sarah, tell me you figure out how to make this work on a bigger scale. Sarah looked up, her face pale but determined. I think so, Captain. The resonance cascade we created destroyed those 5 ships because it was contained in a small area. But if we could create multiple cascade points throughout the nebula, the effect would spread like a chain reaction, finished Lieutenant Alex Thompson, understanding the plan. Exactly, but there's a problem. Sarah brought up a holographic map of the nebula. To create enough cascade points, we need to fire our modified torpedoes at very specific locations. And some of those locations are right in the middle of the main Zephyrian fleet. Jake studied the map. Red dots marked the enemy ships. Over 3,000 of them, all waiting at the nebula's edge like hungry wolves. To reach the cascade points, the Defiance would have to fly through the entire enemy formation. Communications Officer Ryan Clark looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up more Zephyrian communications. Admiral Kethvar is getting reports about the 5 ships we destroyed. He's not happy." "What's he saying?" Jake asked. "He's calling us impossible vermin and ordering his entire fleet to enter the nebula. He wants us found and destroyed immediately." Lieutenant Commander Kelly Barnes spoke from her fighter control station. "Captain, my remaining fighters are barely holding together, and we've lost 4 pilots. If the entire Zephyrian fleet comes after us—" "I know," Jake said quietly. He looked around at his crew, these brave people who had followed him into certain death. "But we knew this was a one-way mission from the beginning. The question is, do we die running or do we die fighting?" Chief Tactical Officer Nick Palmer looked up from his weapons console. "Captain, if Dr. Martinez is right about this cascade effect, we could destroy their entire fleet, every ship, and save billions of human lives," added Medical Officer Dr. Ben Tucker, who had come to the bridge to report on the wounded. Jake made his decision. "Sarah, start preparing the cascade torpedoes. Alex, plot a course that takes us through their formation to all the target points. Kelly, I need every fighter we have left to cover us during the final approach." "Captain," interrupted Lieutenant Amy Foster from the sensor station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures. The Zephyrian fleet is moving into the nebula, all 3,000 ships." Jake watched the tactical display as thousands of red dots began entering the purple and blue clouds of the nebula. Each dot represented a ship capable of destroying entire worlds, and they were all coming for the Defiance. "Ryan, open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship," Jake ordered. "Captain?" Ryan looked confused. "A channel to Admiral Kethvar?" "That's right. I want to talk to him." Ryan worked at his console for a moment. "Channel open, Captain." Jake stepped forward and spoke clearly. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Defiance. I have a message for you." The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the massive Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Kethvar was enormous, even for his species, with dark scales and burning red eyes. His voice was like grinding metal when he spoke. "Human insect, you have destroyed ships of the Eternal Empire. For this crime, your species will suffer beyond imagination." Jake looked directly at the alien commander. "Admiral, you came to our space expecting easy conquest. You thought humans were weak and primitive. You were wrong." Kethvar's eyes blazed with anger. "Your pathetic ship will be crushed like the worthless debris it is. Then we will burn every human world to ash." "Maybe," Jake replied calmly. "But first you'll have to catch us." He signaled to Ryan, who cut the communication. The alien admiral's angry face disappeared from the screen. "That should make him mad enough to bring his whole fleet after us," Jake said with grim satisfaction. "Captain, all cascade torpedoes are ready," Sarah reported. "But I have to warn you, the energy released from a full cascade will be enormous. Even if we're at the edge of the effect, the Defiance probably won't survive." Jake nodded. He had expected as much. "Understood. How long do we need to hold together?" 2 minutes after the last torpedo is fired. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. "Sam," Jake called down to the engine room, "I need everything you've got. Hold this ship together for 3 more minutes, no matter what." "You got it, Captain. This old girl has more fight left in her." The next few minutes felt like hours as the Defiance flew deeper into the nebula. On all sides, Zephyrian ships closed like the jaws of a massive trap. Their weapons lit up the nebula with deadly fire, and only the ship's desperate maneuvering kept them alive. "First cascade point in range," Alex announced. "Firing Torpedo 1." The modified quantum torpedo streaked away into the electrical storms. Seconds later, a new kind of lightning began dancing to the nebula, brighter, more violent than before. "It's working," Sarah shouted over the noise of enemy weapons fire. "The cascade is starting." "Second torpedo away," Alex called out. The Defiant shook as enemy fire struck their weakened shields. Warning lights flashed red across every console. "Hull breach on deck 4. Reported damage, Control Chief Chris Evans. We're losing atmosphere." "Keep us together, Chris," Jake ordered. Third torpedo away. Each torpedo created a new cascade point, and Jake could see the effects spreading to the nebula like ripples in a pond. The electrical storms were becoming more intense, and some of the closer Zephyrian ships were starting to show signs of shield stress. Fourth torpedo, direct hit on cascade point, Alex announced. "Their shields are starting to resonate." Sarah reported with excitement. "The harmonic frequency is building throughout the entire nebula." Admiral Kefvar's voice suddenly boomed over the communication system. "What are you doing, human? What is this sorcery?" Jake grabbed the communication microphone. "It's not sorcery, Admiral. It's science. Something your people forgot while you were busy conquering everyone else." Fifth torpedo away. Alex called out. "That's the last one." The cascade effect was now visible throughout the nebula. Lightning jumped from ship to ship in the Zephyrian fleet, and Jake could see their shields beginning to flicker and fail. But the Defiance was caught in the same storm, and the ship was falling apart around them. "Sarah, how much longer?" Jake asked. 60 seconds until full cascade," she replied. "But, Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup. When this goes off, it's going to be like a star exploding." Explosions rocked the ship as more Zephyrian weapons found their target. Half the bridge consoles were offline, and smoke filled the air. But Jake's crew stayed at their posts, determined to see their mission through to the end. 30 seconds, Sarah announced. Jake looked around at his bridge. Crew won last time. Lisa Carter, his second in command, gave him a proud salute. Alex Thompson continued working at his damaged console. Kelly Barnes coordinated their final fighter cover. Ryan Clark maintained communications with their scattered fighters. These people were heroes, every one of them. 10 seconds, Sarah called out. The Zephyrian fleet was in chaos. Ships were exploding throughout the nebula as their own shields tore them apart. Admiral Kefvar's flagship was trying to retreat, but it was too late. "Cascade at full power," Sarah shouted. The entire nebula exploded with light. Every Zephyrian ship, all 3,000 of them, erupted in flames as 10,000 years of military superiority became their destruction. The USS Defiance, battered and broken, rode the edge of the energy wave like a piece of driftwood in a tsunami. Then everything went quiet, and the stars shone to the clearing nebula on empty space where the galaxy's strongest force had once ruled supreme. Captain Jake Morrison opened his eyes to the sound of alarms and the smell of smoke. The bridge of the USS Defiance looked like a disaster zone. Broken glass covered the floor, sparks flew from damaged consoles, and emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. But they were alive, and that was more than he had expected. "Status report," Jake said, pulling himself up from where he had been thrown against the captain's chair. Commander Lisa Carter was helping Dr. Sarah Martinez to her feet. Blood ran down Sarah's face from a cut on her forehead, but she was smiling. "Captain," the cascade worked. "All Zephyrian ships have been destroyed. Every single one." Jake looked at the main view screen, which was cracked but still working. Where the massive enemy fleet had been, there was now only debris floating in the slowly clearing nebula. 3,000 warships that had conquered countless worlds were now nothing but scrap metal and cooling plasma. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Alex Thompson. "We actually did it." Communications Officer Ryan Clark looked up from his damaged console. "Captain, I'm picking up signals from all over the galaxy. Word is spreading fast about what happened here." "What kind of signals?" Jake asked. "Celebration, mostly. Species that have been under Zephyrian rule for centuries are declaring independence. The Altrian Republic is mobilizing its fleet. The vegan colonies are kicking out Zephyrian governors. It's like the entire galaxy just woke up from a nightmare." Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we're not going to explode. The bad news is we're not going anywhere fast. We need major repairs before this ship can fly properly again. Jake nodded. Do what you can, Sam. We just need to get home. Lieutenant Commander Kelly Barnes reported from her fighter control station. Captain, I've managed to recover 8 of our 12 fighters. We lost 4 good pilots, but the rest are accounted for. The thought of the pilots who didn't make it home made Jake's chest tight. They had saved humanity, but the price had been high. Every person on the Defiance had known this might be a one-way mission, but that didn't make losing anyone easier. Ryan, try to raise her command, Jake ordered. Let them know we're alive and the Zephyrian threat is over. It took several minutes to establish a connection through the nebula's interference, but finally Admiral Patricia Wells appeared on the cracked main screen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and her eyes were red with worry and exhaustion. Captain Morrison? Jake, is that really you? The Admiral's voice was full of disbelief. It's us, Admiral. The Defiance is damaged but flyable. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet has been completely destroyed. Admiral Wells stared at him for a long moment. Jake, did you just tell me that one ship destroyed 3,000 Zephyrian warships? That's correct, Admiral. Dr. Martinez found a way to use their own shield technology against them. The entire enemy fleet was eliminated. The Admiral sat back in her chair, looking stunned. Captain, do you have any idea what this means? The Zephyrian Empire is finished. They have no fleet, no way to enforce their rule over their conquered worlds. Jake looked around at his battered crew. These people had changed the course of galactic history, and most of them didn't even realize it yet. Admiral, we request permission to return to Earth for repairs. Permission granted, Captain. And Jake, the President wants to speak with you as soon as you get back. You and your crew are heroes. Over the next several hours, as the Defiance slowly made its way out of the nebula, the scope of what they had accomplished became clear. Ryan Clark monitored communications from across the galaxy and reported a constant stream of incredible news. The Vraxian Mining Syndicate, which had been forced to give half their profits to the Zephyrians for 300 years, announced they were now free to trade with anyone. The crystalline hegemony declared that their worlds would no longer pay tribute to an empire that no longer existed. Even the proud Centauri Federation, which had managed to stay independent but had lived in fear of Zephyrian expansion, sent a message of congratulations to Earth. But the most amazing news came from the former Zephyrian worlds themselves. Without their massive fleet to enforce obedience, the Empire's control collapsed overnight. Species that had been slaves for generations were free for the first time in their histories. Captain, Sarah said from her science station, I'm reading something interesting in the debris field. It looks like some of the Zephyrian ships had slave crews from conquered worlds. Life pods are escaping from the wreckage. Kelly, dispatch rescue fighters. Jake ordered immediately. Save everyone we can. As they rescued survivors from the destroyed enemy fleet, Jake learned more about how the Zephyrian Empire had really worked. Many of the beings they saved had been forced to serve on Zephyrian ships, taken from their families as children and trained to be engineers and technicians. For them, the destruction of the fleet wasn't a military defeat. It was liberation. A young Alterian engineer named Zextii was brought aboard the Defiance. She had been taken from her home world when she was 12 years old and forced to work in the engine rooms of Zephyrian warships. When Dr. Tucker treated her injuries, she kept saying the same thing over and over. Free. We are finally free. 3 days later, the USS Defiance limped into Earth orbit. The ship looked like it had been through a war, which it had. But when Jake looked out at the blue and green world below, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. They had done it. Humanity was safe. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, debriefings, and ceremonies. Jake and his crew were honored as heroes not just by Earth, but by dozens of grateful species across the galaxy. The President gave them medals. The Galactic Federation offered them anything they wanted. Scientists wanted to study Sarah's cascade technology. But the most important meeting came when representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Earth to discuss what would come next. With the Zephyrian Empire gone, there was a power vacuum that needed to be filled. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Murphy, who had been promoted to handle Earth's new role in galactic politics, addressed the assembly. The age of conquest and domination is over. Humanity offers something different, a partnership of equals. The Altrian ambassador, whose people had been among the first to break free from Zephyrian rule, stood to speak. The humans showed us that the strongest force in the galaxy was not weapons or fear. It was the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. Over the following months, a new kind of galactic government began to form. Instead of an empire based on conquest, it was a true federation where every species had an equal voice. Trade replaced tribute. Cooperation replaced domination. Jake stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Defiance, now serving as the flagship of the new Galactic Defense Force. Through the viewport, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds flying together in formation. Humans, Altarians, vegans, crystallins, and many others worked side by side to protect the freedom they had all helped to win. Dr. Sarah Martinez joined him at the viewport. "Captain, I've been thinking about what we accomplished. We didn't just destroy the Zephyrian fleet. We proved that no force in the universe is stronger than people fighting for their freedom." Jake nodded, watching a group of mixed-species fighter pilots practice maneuvers together. The Zephyrians thought their strength came from their weapons and their size. They were wrong. Real strength comes from knowing what you're fighting for. Communications Officer Ryan Clark approached them. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the outer colonies. Another species has just declared independence from their oppressors and is requesting to join the Federation." "Tell them they're welcome," Jake replied. "Freedom is something everyone deserves." As the Defiance and her escort fleet moved toward their next mission, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had started as a desperate attempt to buy time for Earth's evacuation had become something much bigger. They had shown the galaxy that tyranny could be defeated, that the strong didn't have to rule over the weak. The galaxy's strongest force hadn't been the Zephyrian Armada after all. It was the simple human belief that all beings deserve to be free, and the willingness to fight for that belief no matter the odds. In the end, that had made all the difference.